Welcome
to
Authors
Anonymous
with Carolyn Rosa Pops
and AR Mirabal.
Now, this week
back.
we are definitely back this week. That's a number one fact. Number two fact, no sock puppets on this episode.
Yeah.
We're changing up the format a little bit, right? You know what I mean?
They also, our sock puppets need some training. You know how you take a dog to like training camp or whatever you want to call it? Yeah, our sock puppets need that. So they're taking a break. So me and AR are going to take over and just basically give you facts, straight facts about our topic.
Yeah, because last week Carolyn and I had it would have been funny if it was just a conversation that Carolyn had by herself and then she told me about it after. But no, I was included.
It's usually what happens.
Yeah. Honestly, no, but for real talk, folks, real talk, it is. But Carolyn and I had a conversation that we didn't record, and it was just us giving each other critique. So we really boiled it down, and we really want to drop facts on you. No more bullshit. Like, we want to walk you through this process because I'm telling you, it's hard as shit. Like, it's not. We got to be as upfront with this process as it is, especially when you hop on social media. Everything is just like, easy and butterflies. And especially with all the support that you get, it feels like it's going to be like, like smooth sailings. It's not, you don't even understand what it is until you're midway through. And it's not anything I'm trying to scare you. I'm just trying to prepare you for what's actually happening. You know what I mean?
No, but also, I mean, we said this from the beginning, and I know we're only on episode 7 or 8 now, something like that. But me and AR have been putting a lot of energy and thought into this. And like we said from the beginning, like you guys are with us from the beginning. So we're only growing as we do this. And we came to a consensus that we want to be helpful. We want to actually give real tips about what it's like to be an author. Because while me and AR can go off on tangents and just talk and bullshit, and we'll do that with anybody, and we love that. The point in this podcast, really, we want to drive home real advice and things that will help you in your writing journey. So we decided to buckle down and be good and give that to you guys. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, just before we break off into what we're actually going to be talking about with this episode, the name Authors Anonymous isn't for us. We're not anonymous. You know who we are. The anonymous part is you guys.
Yeah.
And you gals and any dogs listening, any birds, parrots, aliens that are tuning in, whatever the fuck. It's for you. Like, you're the anonymous part.
Right.
We're trying to help anonymous authors. That's the whole thing here.
And so we want to make tips that help everybody. Me and AR could go off about us and our books and all of that, but at the end of the day, the anonymous part is whoever we're talking to. And if you listen to our first episode, like we said from the beginning, we do just want to help and give advice. Yeah. So that's what we're going to try to do tonight. And we're talking about building plots, which does go back to one of our episodes about plot building. So this is kind of the reverse of that. We did plot building, but now we're talking about building the plot, meaning how do you integrate once you have that idea? How do you integrate that into your story? Not just the plot building and how it seems in your story, but how is it going to actually structure what the fuck you're talking about? Yeah.
And not only that, it's sorry to get in there, but like, it's really a culmination of a whole bunch of all the topics that we've talked about thus far. Yeah. Everything that we talked about, genres and tropes, which is the last episode. Make sure to listen to that. But the whole thing about genres and tropes, how this leads into it, is you have to understand how to layer those type of genres. Like we talked about in that episode, while you can go just straight fact, romance, only romance.
Right.
The good writing, well, I can't say good writing, but like layered writing has those different types of layers in it. Even Stephen King has elements of some type of comedic effect or some type of historical or some type of other element that integrates that emotional link that keeps you reading. It's not just horror all the time.
Yeah, no, and I think actually what we talked about in our last episode too was that you can have a specific genre, but you have multiple layers to it. You could have a science fiction genre, but you might have a romance that happens within your science fiction genre. So this is almost the flip of it, where your plot, that actually is what defines your genre. It's not just the character arcs that happen and the other subplots that happen within your story, and we'll get into that, but the plot essentially is your genre. Because if your plot is about a murdered lover, you almost think it's like a thriller romance. Or if your plot is about exploring a new universe, you almost think it's futuristic, dystopian, or science fiction, whatever. So the plot is the hub, kind of what we talked about last week, when in knowing your genre, and then how do you apply a plot to actually carry out your genre, which is like the elements and the flesh and the style and the accessories of your story. That is kind of the plot. So the genre is just the theme, and then the plot is like the clincher. One of those things that we talk about with building your plots, or me and AR rather talked about, was just at first generating those ideas and whatever that kind of means to you. Whether it's story building or writing prompts, or we talked about just writing it and getting it out, but just generating your idea. And I think a good way to go about that is questioning what you're passionate about. So what's your passion and what ignites that oomph, to put in simple terms, what ignites that amnesty or that drive? That's the plot. That's like your bread and butter, the good stuff, what you care about.
Yeah, like if you want to think about building a plot and like building like the human anatomy wise, like you have to get the heart in order to kind of like develop the rib cage around it, and then the skeleton, which is the actual plot, and then dialogue, the meat and the bones, XYZ, right?
Right.
And then like, you know, the earrings are like, you know, the like what color the alien is in your world, whatever. You know, you understand the analogy, right? So going off that idea, you really have to find what the heart is. In my case, science fiction. I geek out over the smallest, minute things. On Rick and Morty, am I paying attention to like this whole overarching crazy plot? Of course I'm paying attention, but I will just, my mind will race over like a little line that they'll say like, it's like, oh yeah, that happened in another universe. And I'll just like, I'll pause right there and be like, oh shit, what happened in another universe? Well, that's crazy. That is the type of shit that I love. So when I write, that's where my heart is. I'm putting in that level of world building. I'm putting in that level of sci-fi, those type of things that I like, that make me excited. I put that is where I start. And if your shit is romance, whatever it is, that is your start.
And that's just some life advice too. Whatever you're passionate about, run with it, because I mean, it's there for a reason, whether it's a past experience, which we talked about, in inspiration as well. So usually that inspiration is something you're passionate about. I just mean, that's what you got to go with. And you need to display it. You need to get it out in writing in whatever form is most comfortable for you. So AR said he was very analytical. That could be something like writing out a chart for you. You have a topic, say you're passionate about climate change. Well, bullet point, what about climate change makes you passionate? Is it the animals dying? Is it our planet? Is it the science that we're lacking, or the science that we're growing based on that? What drives you? And then probably when you figure that out, you know how to present the other ideas, meaning, well, what are points that counter argue your idea, and how can you write that out? Or what are ideas that drive your result, and write that out? So generate some ideas of what you're passionate about, and then write it out in a way that makes sense to you. We're kind of just going back to the drawing board and making it make sense, and just figuring out, well, what's the core? What do my characters want to do? What do I want to say? What do I care about? So that is kind of the plot when you generate ideas. What gets you?
Definitely. And on top of that is going off of the whole thing that we started off about, how to layer these genres into a plot. If you understand the base and you understand how the blood is flowing through your body, then I think it's a little bit easier to understand where the muscles go. Understand? Right. Like,
no, this is, yes, I understand.
I always do that. But basically that is what it is, right? Like, you can if you drop a comedic relief thing immediately after a very tense scene, it takes away from the tension. So you have to you have to know when it is. You can't just drop a comedic relief wherever. It has to be at a situation where it's merited, you know. The
right.
same thing with your romance. If you're, you know, one of the biggest commentary that people had with the whole Godzilla versus Kong thing was that they went to go see a Godzilla Kong thing, and then there was this whole emotional development, this B story that people just did not care about, and it felt shoehorned. It was a 2-hour, 15-minute movie, and they showed 20 minutes of this B plot. Why even put that in there? You could have cut that off, and it would have been an hour 45 of exactly what people wanted. So you have to you just have to understand where these things are best elemented in.
And no, you led right into our second topic, which is just kind of spreading it out. Because while you're passionate about something, usually you're fired up and you want to info dump and you want to give everything right then and there. But on a story and actually making a good book out of it, every writer knows the art of spreading out conflict, which I think is kind of what you're talking about, where depending, like, how do you build your plot then? You have this main central idea, but then how does it begin in the beginning of your story? Where's the crux in the middle of your story? And how is it resolved at the end of your story? So you need to figure out things, just so to say, where to put that. Is that with your characters and they encounter an event that's like, oh, this is an inkling of what's building? Or is it between characters and a dialogue and an emotional thing? And you're like, this is where I can see where the relationship's going. You start putting inklings in for your reader to start thinking for themselves. Building your plot is when you start to trust that the reader is with the story and knows where it's heading. And you want to give them enough information, at least at the beginning of your story, to question some things and ponder their own how they think it's going to end. And then you read them through or carry them through and they see for themselves, oh, this is how it went, or I knew it. However your reaction is, you want to help them through that. And your plot, the pacing is so vital. So you don't want to info dump, and that'll be another video for sure, just about info dumping and clear writing. But the plot is like the crux of that. That is the pacing of your story. So the most common, I think, is the 3-part story, which AR, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's like the 3-part in the plot is like the beginning of when seeds are planted, the middle when it's like the fight or the war, and then the ending, which is the resolution. That's the most common, that's the most simple, and I recommend starting out with that. But there's a few other ways to seed your plot as well.
Yeah, in film, that's act 1, act 2, and act 3. So if you think about it kind of like this relates actually a little bit to what I talked about in the last episode, I believe, that when you're building a plot, it's all about, it's not just the overarching conflict, right? You have the overarching, like, this is the blue side, this is the red side, sprinkled in all the different elements and all the different geopolitical issues, all the political issues, all the, geopoliticals, whatever. Whatever it is, these people have like long ears with like the floppy, earlobes. These people have like, pointed ones. Now they hate each other for whatever reason. Whatever it is that like that you're going to make your conflict on. It's not just the overarching one, but there has to be little ones as well. The ones that guide you through. Like the conflict doesn't have to just be as progressingly from chapters 1 to, like, if it was if you have a graph chart, right? The conflict can't just be like this. It has to be like kind of staggered.
Which, by the way, for those of you that are not watching on YouTube, when AR says this, he means it can't just be like a
pyramid. Exactly. It can't just be like a stagnant line. It has to be like for all you musicians out there, it has to be Jagger Sabertooth, whatever it's called, jagged,
whatever that means for you guys.
Yeah. Basically, it needs to look like kind of razor teeth. The conflict needs to go up and down per chapter. What is driving you not just to read the book, but to read the next chapter? That's something you have to constantly remember when you're building a plot. You're not just trying to build somebody in to read, your 300, 600 page book. You got to build them to read from page 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. We're in an internet age. Have you seen cats falling over? It's hilarious. That's what you're competing against. You get me?
Yeah.
Have you seen Bill Burr on YouTube? He's hilarious, dude. That's what you're competing against. Like,
but we believe in you, and you can
we
do
believe
it.
In you 100%. I'm not being negative here. I'm just like reminding, like, that is your competition. You have to like constantly think about that while you're training. Basically, this is training period.
Thing is, don't cut corners when thinking about your plot, because I mean, we'll get to it, but our last episode was about plot holes. Cutting corners with your essential plot, your main plot that you want to drive home to the readers, fucking up on that or messing up on that, like, I mean, that's your first draft. So just know you're going to have to tighten that. Yeah, and part of that, just generate those ideas, start there, and then spread it out, see how it fits, how it can build. And that can totally spread to whatever genre. And I know this is very vague, but you should know your writing and your style and your story. So think about how it would just amplify your story and see where it sees best fit. So that could be the beginning of the story. It could be not right until the middle, until the characters fully know the consequences they've dealt with. But I'm assuming you're all good writers and you can understand the difference in leading your readers and just info dumping them. And AR touched on a subject too, kind of about like conflict and about how that affects the main character. So with your plot, your conflict just is going to mean how does your character develop, and that can be sub characters or main characters. And if you can make your sub characters drive the plot home, like with your main plot, I mean bonus points.
And just to reference back into, I think it's either episode 3 or 4 with our about character development, is that you have to stay true to your character. I think one of the tips that we ended that episode on was that either you have to be one of those people that can like truly be in the shoes of your character and kind of like live and like kind of like, you know, be in that mindset when you write, or you have to have kind of like a character bio thing to reference off, right?
Right.
When you make that decision of what that character is, stay true to it. Don't take the tips that we're telling you now to mean that I have to, oh, well, that means that I have to make my main character or a side character do something outside of their character definition just to keep the plot moving. You still have to stay true to your character, which is a major thing.
We talked about like basically that in that same episode, where it's not always changing your character, but sometimes it's the environment in which your character is in that makes them react, and it's still being true to themselves. One of the examples that AR and I talked about before starting this podcast was that like if you have a main character and a villain, say that's one of your conflicts, that's like the atypical plots in a story, which is protagonist versus antagonist. But what if you have one of your sub characters fall in love with the villain? That is major, because it obviously is going to hit the protagonist in some way where it's like, I'm friends with this guy and he loves the person I'm fighting. So it just adds much more to your plot. So if you can make your sub characters push your plot or add more of that conflict forward, I mean, bonus points. But at the same time, they don't have to. You can just have an offset romance that's not associated with the plot that hooks readers for other reasons. Like we had said in our last episode about genres and tropes, you can write about sci-fi, but you can have a romantic thing in there because it will attract numerous of readers, not just a specific group. So you can put that stuff in there just to have a broader range of audience. But I think from a plot structure standpoint, if you can have one of your sub characters or subplots amplify your main plot, that's just bonus points. And that kind of comes way after just generating that basic idea, what you're passionate about, and then seeing how is it going to actually affect my story? And then in that effectiveness, how am I going to present it? Is it going to be beginning, middle, end? Is it just going to be middle end type of thing? And then how's it going to affect my main character? So all of these things kind of need to be sorted and then delve into subplots. Because if you don't take care of those first things first, that's what's going to happen in plot holes when you try to add in subplots before the first main plot is fully concrete.
And not only that, but they have to groove well. You know what I mean? Right. It's kind of like those like puzzles that like babies have. Like you can't put a circle in a square and expect it to be okay. Like the reader's not going to smooth their hand over and not feel that bump. You got to be precise. These things have to be, and it's again, this I actually kind of references like the inspiration thing. All you have to do is not only look at the media that you like, but you also have to look at your own life. The thing that Carolyn said about character development, not only necessarily being the character doing some crazy up and down shit emotionally, it can just be the environment changing them. Look at what happened with everything with COVID. Think about how you were prior to that and how your life was and your friend group was, and then how
Snap.
environment changes that and changes how you are and how you react to the world and everything. So
Yeah.
simple things like that. And all you have to do is translate that. You can turn that subplot into an alien invasion.
Right.
You just transfer energy. It's easy. Well, I can't say it's easy, but like, it's you have trails to follow at least. You're not like just diving into open waters here.
Here's the key to that too. I mean, especially if you don't want to dive into unknown waters and you just kind of see where your writing takes you. And when that can be great in the generating stage, but when you're seriously considering about publishing and getting your story out there, it's no longer just your writing. Of course, it always is in some aspect, but we've said on numerous episodes, if you want to look at it from a business standpoint, it's not just freestyle writing. There is a consensus and a form. And as self-publishers, we don't have kind of the goods of traditional publishing for others to seek that out for you and be like, this is not going to work. Here's what it is. And that's it. Self-publishing is kind of figuring it out for yourself. So these tips that we give are kind of like the known of both sides, but you need to have, the main plot figured out and then delve into your subplots so it doesn't delve into plot holes. And then to even avoid plot holes, you need to have that logical progression, meaning no loose ends. So at the end of your plot, so we got to the beginning and then kind of the crux, but then at the very end of it, does it all tie up? Unless you're writing a trilogy or a series or a saga, what have you, certain things will be left unknown, obviously, for the point of the next story. But those subplots that you created within your story, they should be tied up within that first story because the reader it's that trust between the writer and the reader. The reader wants to come away understanding, having knowledge and closing, basically closure, a trust with the author that they finish something, but they still want to read the next book because the main point is evolving. So the subplots are something just added in, sprinkled in after your subplot's fully polished, so to say. And just make sure everything comes together at the end. That is like kind of the key that all of your plots in general will work.
Yeah. And not only that, but I think the way to really integrate that whole thing of the subplots and the plots, and also while bringing in the whole thing of conflict and resolution at a constant rate, right? It's not just the book length, but chapter per chapter, page by page, right? I think the way to integrate it, and this is something I talked to Carolyn about a while back, is that when you're starting a scene, you're starting a chapter, you have to start late and end early.
Yes, that was super helpful advice.
So
listen to this, people. Say that again. Say that again.
We're going to repeat the last answer. You have to come in late and leave early, right? You got to be that mysterious guy at the bar, gets 2 drinks, says some shit, and then fucking bounces. That's what you got to do. All right. What you do is, let's say that your plot starts off with a conversation. You don't start off with oh, hey, how you doing, Bill? How's the wife and kids? Oh, well, don't start there. Start the conversations well, like, well, I fucking told her, right? Anyway, you got to start at like some midpoint somewhere. And then instead of doing the whole thing where you almost want to spoon feed the plot into a person, let the plot just kind of emanate itself through the dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of starting off with like, oh, how was your day? You can start off with like, well, anyway, I told you about what happened yesterday to Bill, right? Blah, blah, blah. And then, Bill's little thing will again be brought up in like, maybe a couple pages. Start off with things like that. And then when things start to tense up a little bit, you don't end on the gunshot. You end on the guy pulling out the gun. Right. You get what I'm saying?
So again, that just relates back to pacing, which is like major in the plot, because the way that your story unfolds and the way that AR is describing, that's planting the seeds of your plot throughout the story. Yeah. So where do you begin and where do you drop hints of your plot? And how do you want the reader to basically follow through with the story? It's a lot, definitely.
No, It definitely is a lot, but if it's almost like really funny. As I'm saying this, I'm actually getting really excited about writing because I'm starting to
Yeah.
think that when you actually start really putting all these ideas together, and again, that's why I think it's awesome that this episode is like a culmination of everything we talked about before. Because when you start putting all these things together, when you start bringing in inspiration, character development, and you start
Mm,
really thinking about all these things on a grand scale, then that's when the fun of writing comes in. You can think
yeah.
about when would be the best part to put that comic relief. You
Uh,
can you can start thinking about foreshadowing. Listen, you know how fun foreshadowing is to write? I literally giggle like a girl, like a fan girl, when I'm writing a foreshadowing. Like I giggle. I'm
yeah.
just like thinking about like that one person out of a million that's gonna get where I'm going with this. Like it tickles me. It's my fancy. Like it is so great to write that. And when you really start putting all these things together, that is when you can start like really plotting out how your book is going to go, not just paragraph, not just page by page, but like
Right.
letter by letter, like almost like poetry. Each syllable like has a significance to it.
And think about, I mean, seriously, that is a whole nother conversation, even just with syllable, the way that you italicize words or put explanation points. Oh my God, it's detailed. And like AR said, when you think about all these things on a grand scheme, they might seem minute, whatever. When making them, oh, you gotta kind of look at them with a grand scheme. And I know it can be overwhelming, and I know it can be big, but you gotta look at it with this type of fun and just take your time with it and feel it through. And like, especially with self-publishing, the beauty of it is that there is absolutely no rush. You are your own time schedule. So like feel it out and like just, and you know that you'll do no wrong. And I mean, and part of that too, when talking about where to exactly plot things and foreshadowing, think about the reader when you've read a good book and you have that same feeling when you're just like connected, or that one liner that hits you when you read it 12 times over to feel that feeling over and over. I mean, imagine that throughout your whole book with just taking these tips really to heart, or not even just our tips, but I mean like the actual art of structuring your book to heart. To be honest, like I didn't realize all of this until after I had written my book. Part of the reason why we're doing this podcast is, oh, I wish I knew when. So seriously, we're giving advice to people that are going to write much better books than ours. And I just hope that like this helps. But I mean,
no, I mean like honestly,
in.
heed these tips. I really do believe they will help. I really do.
So with that, with your plot, what are you passionate about? For us right now, apparently it's just writing. So just write it out, whatever chart makes sense to you, generate just ideas. And then you have your idea and then spread it out. And in that, spread it out in terms of, well, what's my main character going to do with it? How is it going to drive the story forward? And then subplots. How are my other characters going to carry it out? Or what are other things that can happen while this plot's happening that makes sense? And then as long as it ties up at the end, logical progression, you have a full story. And then go into another book if need be, if your main plot's not wrapped up. That's like a trilogy episode. But yeah, listen to our last episode about plot holes too, if you're a little bit confused about plots in general.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead and just you can almost think about that as the prequel episode to this one.
Right.
So
Yeah,
like you know what I mean? You can watch either in either direction, but if you watch both of them, it'll make like a more concise story. You know how it is.
Right. So this was me and AR. Well, we're still going, but it's our first season just about structuring your book. So that's what this is all about. Next season and other seasons, we'll delve more into the publishing and maybe the illustrations and the editing process and the formatting and the marketing. So we're not quite done here yet. We'll keep coming back and it's just going to grow from here. And I say that with a happy.
And we have a lot of very interesting things coming. We have a new episode structure type of thing where we are going to invite people on to have honest critiques about their book. Honest. None of this like, oh, it's really nice and just like go on by. Yeah. We're going to break it down.
Wait, here's a little teaser. AR, and I love AR's book. This is so wrong of me to say, but here's a teaser of honest critique. reading chapter 2 of AR's book yet to be published. He asked me, if you pick this up in a bookstore, would you buy it? And
Chapter
I said,
1.
Chapter
prologue,
1, would you
let's
buy
be
it? And I
honest.
said, no. And
Yeah.
here's why. And there we go. That is what's coming to you.
Yep. And you know what? I'm gonna hold back my tears because you know what? If they see you cry, you're weak. Or that's
Here's the part I am reading the book and I do like it. I do like it.
And again, just differential because she's already fucking up my marketing here. The book she's referring to is the one that's published, but it's perfect. And the one she's trashing is the one, my first draft of another book. So,
which is why I'm trashing it. We're in that phase.
Yeah, exactly. And
don't be scared. We won't trash your book. We'll talk about all things.
Yeah.
You can, comment on our stuff.
Yeah, but the point is that you have to like, I think we maybe talked about it in a previous thing, but like 5-star reviews and 1-star reviews are just as important because one builds you up, but one is like, okay, what can I derive from this? Everything is a lesson if you take it as that, and that's a life goal right there.
That's a plot moment right there.
Yeah.
How can your character learn from that?
Yeah. And again, just to end the podcast on like kind of like how we started it, everything is passion. So even though we're talking about analytics, you have to understand I'm analytical as fuck. Like at the end of the day, this is your passion. Writing should be something that you like doing.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. Just really run with it. Like, of course, you're gonna overthink it because you're a writer. That's how life is. This author's anonymous. We can all pretend like we're having drinks over here, and
right.
But you have to. It's fun. This is fun. This is why we do it, right? We're obviously not doing this for money. I mean, no way. If you're doing, dude, all right. If you're here for that, I'm telling you, choose another club. Like this should be a passion thing for you.
Yeah.
And money will come after. I'm not saying it's not possible. Believe me, it's 100%. Possible. But passion and you loving to do this should be the forefront. And this is the end of the episode. Authors
Anonymous.
Episode is wrapped. Check with us next Tuesday when we talk about the next subject. And you already know, mad good shit is coming up soon. Stay with us. Peace out.